My name is Rosa Montgomery, and I am 32 years old. In my family, success has always been measured by prestigious titles and six-figure salaries. I chose a different path, one that prioritized passion over prestige. When my family planned their annual luxury vacation, my brother Ethan texted me, "This cruise is for successful people only, no failures allowed." What they did not know was that the yacht they had chartered actually belonged to me. Before I share what happened when they found out, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself against toxic family members. Growing up in Boston with the Montgomery family name meant expectations were always sky high. My parents, Amanda and Robert Montgomery, were the definition of old money ambition. Dad built his law practice into one of the most prestigious firms in Massachusetts, while Mom managed her family investment portfolio with ruthless precision. Every dinner conversation revolved around achievements, connections, and status symbols. My brother Ethan was the golden child from day one. 4 years older than me, he breezed through Phillips Exeter Academy before collecting an economics degree from Harvard and an MBA from Wharton. By 30, he was already a junior partner at an elite investment firm, driving a Mercedes and living in a Beacon Hill brownstone. My sister Jessica, 2 years my senior, followed the approved family path just as perfectly. She graduated from Johns Hopkins Medical School, married the son of a hospital administrator, and quickly became the youngest attending physician in her department. Her Christmas cards showcased her picture-perfect life with her husband Blake and their 2 immaculately dressed children. Then there was me, Rosa, the family puzzle piece that never quite fit. From childhood, I questioned things my family took for granted. When Dad pointed out the biggest house in our neighborhood and said that should be our goal, I asked why anyone needed that much space. When Mom pushed me to join the right clubs and activities that would look good on college applications, I wondered aloud why enjoyment was never a criterion. That Montgomery dreamer streak, my grandfather would say with a half smile, the only person who seemed to find my different perspective endearing rather than troubling. My earliest memories include being drawn to the ocean. While my siblings attended prestigious summer programs between school years, I begged to attend sailing camp. The freedom of the open water called to me in ways that country clubs and charity galas never did. By 14, I knew more about yacht models and cruise destinations than anyone in my family. Boats are hobbies, Rosa, not careers, my father would say dismissively whenever I brought up my interest in the maritime or hospitality industries. Montgomerys run businesses, they do not serve on them. The first time I was officially labeled the family disappointment came during my sophomore year of high school. Our school hosted a career fair, and while Ethan had networked with investment bankers and Jessica had shadowed doctors, I spent the entire event talking to a representative from a luxury cruise line. "She is just going through a phase," my mother assured my concerned father over dinner that evening, talking about me as though I were not sitting right there. "All teenagers rebel in some way. At least she is not getting tattoos or dating some drummer." "I am not rebelling," I tried to explain. "I just find the cruise industry fascinating. The logistics, the hospitality elements, the business model." "Enough, Rosa," my father interrupted. "When you are paying your own bills, you can indulge in whatever fascinations you like. Until then, we expect you to focus on practical goals." That night established the pattern that would define our family dynamics for years to come. My interests and dreams were treated as temporary distractions, at best character flaws, at worst. Love in our household was firmly conditional, tied directly to achievement and conformity. Despite this, I maintained my interest in maritime business, subscribing to industry magazines and following the major players in luxury yacht charters. My bedroom walls displayed sailing vessels instead of boy bands, and my summer reading consisted of biographies of hospitality magnates rather than the classics my parents pushed on me. Holidays became a special kind of torture, as extended family gatherings turned into achievement showcases. Aunt Patricia would inevitably ask, "And what about Rosa?" still interested in those boats with the same tone someone might use to discuss a child pretending to be a superhero. My cousin William, pursuing his PhD in economics, once pulled me aside at Thanksgiving. "Just pick something practical that you can tolerate," he advised. "Play their game until you have enough independence to do what you want." But compromise had never been my strong suit. The more my family pushed me toward their definition of success, the more determined I became to define it for myself. When senior year arrived, and college applications began, the real battle lines were drawn. "We have arranged alumni interviews at Harvard, Yale, and Princeton," my mother announced one evening. "Your essay still needs work, but your grades should be sufficient if you nail the interviews." "I have already applied to Cornell School of Hotel Administration," I replied calmly. "Their maritime hospitality program is exactly what I want." The explosion that followed was nuclear. Words like ungrateful, foolish, and throwing away opportunities flew around our dining room. Jessica stared at her plate in uncomfortable silence, while Ethan openly sided with our parents. "Why do you always have to make everything so difficult?" he asked me later. "Just get a respectable degree first, then do whatever weird boat thing you want as a hobby." That night cemented my status as the family black sheep. Though I eventually compromised by attending Boston University's business school, to keep the peace, the damage was done. I had revealed myself as someone who would not simply follow the prescribed Montgomery path without question, and for that I would never be fully embraced again. My freshman year at Boston University began with a constant stream of subtle comparisons to my siblings' college experiences. Mom would casually mention how Ethan had been tapped for an honor society his first semester, or how Jessica had secured a research position with a prominent professor. Every family dinner became an exercise in measuring me against the golden standards they had established. "Business is a practical choice," at least my father would say, as if granting a small concession, though I still think law would have given you more options. I played along maintaining decent grades, while secretly taking every elective I could related to hospitality management, tourism, economics, and maritime business. When summer arrived, my parents expected me to intern at my father's law firm like both my siblings had done. "Actually, I have accepted an entry-level position at Marina Bay," I announced at Sunday brunch. "They need guest services staff for the summer." The news was met with barely concealed horror. "You mean you will be some sort of glorified receptionist?" my mother asked, lips pursed in disapproval. "I will be learning the marina business from the ground up," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "The best way to understand an industry is to work in it directly." "This is just embarrassing," Ethan muttered. "My sister, the boat check-in girl." Despite their disdain, that summer proved transformative. I absorbed everything about the marina operations, from booking procedures to customer service protocols. I made detailed notes about what worked and what could be improved. The marina manager, Stephanie, noticed my enthusiasm and began giving me additional responsibilities. When sophomore year began, I made a decision that would alter my life trajectory forever. After 2 weeks of classes, I walked into the registrar office and withdrew from Boston University. With the tuition refund and my summer savings, I had enough to rent a tiny apartment and continue working at the marina full-time. The family reaction was apocalyptic. My father threatened to cut me off completely. My mother cried about the shame of telling her friends. Ethan called me an ungrateful brat who was throwing away my potential out of spite. Only Jessica showed a glimmer of understanding. "Are you sure this is what you want?" she asked during a rare private conversation. "It is going to be a hard road." I am sure I told her. I would rather struggle doing something I love than succeed at something that makes me miserable. True to their word, my parents ceased financial support. The next 2 years were lean but educational. I moved from Marina Bay to a position at Boston Harbor Yacht Club, then to an assistant role at a luxury charter company. Each job taught me something new about the business, while expanding my network in the industry. My family assumed I was just scraping by. In reality, I was building valuable experience and connections. I lived simply investing most of my earnings back into maritime business courses and saving the rest. My apartment was sparse but functional, my wardrobe practical rather than fashionable. To my status-conscious family, these were all signs of failure. The turning point came during my third year working in the industry. I had moved up to charter coordinator at Blue Water Yachts, one of the premier luxury yacht charter companies on the East Coast. The owner, Harold Whitaker, was a maritime industry legend in his 70s with no children or obvious successor. Harold took notice of my detailed improvement suggestions and innovative marketing ideas. Unlike my family, he saw my passion for the business as an asset rather than a liability. He began inviting me to sit in on executive meetings, asking for my input on strategic decisions. "You have good instincts, Rosa," he told me, after I had coordinated a particularly complex charter for some demanding international clients. "And you understand this business is about more than just boats. It is about creating experiences, managing expectations, and solving problems before they arise." When Harold offered to mentor me more formally, I jumped at the opportunity. For the next 2 years, I shadowed him through every aspect of the business, while continuing to excel in my regular duties. I learned about fleet management staff, training, financial planning, and client relations from one of the best minds in the industry. What my family did not know during those years of dismissing my career as Rosa playing with boats was that I was quietly becoming Harold Whitaker protégé. When he confided that he was considering retirement but worried about his company legacy, I gathered my courage and presented him with a detailed succession plan that included me eventually taking over the business. "You want to buy me out?" he asked, eyebrows raised in surprise. "Eventually, yes," I replied. "I have been saving, and with the right financing plan over time, I believe I can do it. I would preserve your legacy while bringing new ideas to keep Blue Water competitive for decades to come." Harold considered my proposal seriously, and after months of discussion with his financial advisors, we structured a deal. He would gradually transition ownership to me over 5 years, with me working as Chief Operating Officer during the transition. The arrangement included performance benchmarks that would adjust the purchase price based on company growth under my leadership. By the time I turned 30, I was effectively running Blue Water Yachts, though Harold remained the public face of the company. Our partnership flourished, as my innovations increased bookings by 28% and expanded our fleet from 12 to 18 vessels. Harold's decision to step back and trust me had paid off for both of us. Throughout this professional transformation, I maintained a strategic silence about my rising success with my family. During rare family gatherings, I answered questions about my work, vaguely allowing them to maintain their assumption that I was still struggling in an entry-level position. I knew that sharing my accomplishments would only be met with skepticism or attempts to take credit for my success, despite their lack of support. "Still working with those boats?" my father would ask dismissively at holiday dinners. "Yes, still in the yacht business," I would reply, simply swallowing the urge to mention that I now owned controlling interest in one of the most exclusive charter companies on the eastern seaboard. This private success gave me a sense of satisfaction, but I had no plans to dramatically reveal my accomplishments to my family. That changed, however, when Harold fully retired and transferred his remaining shares to me, making me the complete owner of Blue Water Yachts and its multi-million-dollar fleet. Just 3 months later, my family unwittingly set the stage for a truth they were not prepared to face. The Montgomery family annual vacation tradition began when I was 12, ostensibly as a way to strengthen family bonds away from work pressures. In reality, these trips quickly became another arena for status displays and networking. My parents always chose destinations that combined luxury with strategic social opportunities, from Aspen ski lodges frequented by business partners to Mediterranean resorts where they could accidentally bump into potential clients. Despite the underlying agenda, I had always been included in these family trips. Even during the worst of our disagreements about my career path, vacation invitations remained a constant, though often accompanied by lectures about how the trip was possible thanks to the practical career choices my parents and siblings had made. This year, with my 33rd birthday approaching, I had actually been looking forward to the annual vacation announcement. For the first time, I was in a position to genuinely enjoy the luxury without feeling like a charity case. Perhaps I might even drop subtle hints about my success, testing the waters for eventual honesty about my professional achievements. The news came through Jessica, not directly from our parents as usual. During one of our monthly phone calls, which had become more amicable as adult distance softened our childhood rivalries, she mentioned the trip casually. "Mom has been driving me crazy with cruise cabin questions," she sighed. "As if I have time to debate balcony sizes while preparing for a medical conference." "Cruise?" I asked, genuinely confused. I had not heard anything about a cruise. There was an awkward pause on the line. "Oh," Jessica finally said, her voice tight with discomfort. "I thought you knew. The family vacation this year is a luxury yacht charter through the Greek islands." My stomach dropped. A yacht charter, and I had not been informed. This was exactly my industry, the world I had built my career in. "When was this decided?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "There have been emails going back and forth for weeks," Jessica admitted. "I assumed you were on the thread. Let me check." I heard keyboard clicking in the background. "Oh, I see. Mom started a new thread without copying you. That must have been an oversight." But we both knew it was not an oversight. After hanging up with Jessica, I checked my archived emails and found the original vacation announcement from 2 months prior. I had indeed been included on that first message, but was conspicuously absent from all follow-up planning. I called my mother, directly determined to address the situation head-on. "Rosa, darling," she answered with practiced warmth that did not reach her tone. "What a lovely surprise. I was just about to call my decorator." "I just spoke with Jessica about the family cruise," I said, skipping pleasantries. "It seems my invitation got lost somewhere." A pause, then, "Oh, that. Well, we assumed you would be too busy with your boat job. Besides, this is quite an exclusive charter. The cost per person is substantial." "I see," I replied, my voice cooling. "So, this is about money. You think I cannot afford to contribute my share?" "Darling, there is no shame in prioritizing your unusual career choice over financial stability. We all make our choices." Her condescension was palpable. "This cruise is really more suited to professionals at a certain level. Your father has invited some important colleagues. Ethan is bringing potential investors. It is partly a networking opportunity." The implication was crystal clear. I would embarrass them in front of their important connections. I was not successful enough to be seen with the illustrious Montgomerys. "I understand," I said finally. "Thanks for clarifying." After hanging up, I sat in my office overlooking Boston Harbor, surrounded by evidence of my success that my family had never seen. The irony was almost too perfect. I picked up my phone to text Jessica, hoping she might at least tell me which charter company they had booked with, when a message from Ethan popped up on my screen. "Heard you called Mom about the cruise. Some advice: stop trying to guilt-trip your way into family events. This cruise is for successful people, no failures allowed. Maybe next year, if you finally get a real job." I stared at the text in disbelief, my hands shaking with a combination of hurt and anger. After everything I had accomplished, after all the years of hard work, while they dismissed my choices, they still saw me as nothing but a failure. Taking a deep breath, I opened my company scheduling software and searched for Montgomery. There it was, a 7-day charter of our newest and most luxurious vessel, the Blue Horizon, scheduled to depart from Athens in 3 weeks. The booking had been made through an agency rather than directly, which explained why none of my staff had made the connection to my family name. The charter price made me raise my eyebrows. Even split between my parents, Ethan, Jessica, and her husband, they were each paying a small fortune for this experience. The vessel they had chosen was our flagship, a 120-foot luxury motor yacht, with 6 staterooms, a crew of 8, and every imaginable amenity. The confirmation email listed Captain Derek Wilson as the assigned skipper for their journey. Derek had been with Blue Water for 5 years and was one of my most trusted captains. I picked up the phone and dialed his number, a plan already forming in my mind. "Derek, it is Rosa. Are you in the office today? There is something important I need to discuss about your upcoming Athens charter." As I hung up, I felt a strange calm settle over me. After years of allowing my family to believe what they wanted about my career, it was finally time for the truth. Not out of spite or revenge, but because continuing to hide my success was becoming more damaging than revealing it. I pulled up the passenger manifest my parents had submitted. In addition to my family members, they had invited 3 of my father's legal partners and their spouses, 2 potential clients for Ethan, and a hospital administrator, and his wife, who Jessica and Blake wanted to impress. Every person on that list was being brought for strategic networking purposes, a vacation that doubled as a business opportunity. How fitting that their exclusive networking cruise was about to become a very different kind of revelation than they had planned. I sat back in my leather chair looking at the model of the Blue Horizon, displayed prominently on my bookshelf, and allowed myself a small smile. In 3 weeks, the Montgomerys would finally learn what success really looked like. The days following my discovery of the family cruise exclusion passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. Initial hurt gradually transformed into something more complex, a mixture of righteous indignation and unexpected opportunity. I oscillated between wanting to simply call my family out on their cruelty and the more dramatic option of revealing my success in person on the yacht. I needed an outside perspective, so I called my closest friend Madison for lunch at our favorite waterfront restaurant. Madison had been my roommate during my brief college stint, and unlike my other university connections, she had stuck by me when I dropped out. As the daughter of working-class parents who had built a successful landscaping business, she understood both the value of practical experience and the prejudice faced by those who chose unconventional paths to success. "They did what?" Madison exclaimed after I explained the situation, nearly choking on her iced tea. "And your brother actually texted that, after everything you have accomplished." "To be fair, they have no idea what I have accomplished," I reminded her, pushing my salad around with my fork. "That is partly on me for never correcting their assumptions." "No, Rosa. Do not do that. Do not take responsibility for their judgment," Madison said firmly. "You kept your success private because they never showed genuine interest in your life. That is on them." Maybe I conceded, but now I have a decision to make. Do I just let it go, or do I finally show them who I have become? Madison considered this, twirling a strand of her auburn hair, as she always did when thinking deeply. "What outcome are you hoping for? Reconciliation, revenge? Because those require different approaches." Her question made me pause. What did I want? The fantasy of seeing their shocked faces held a certain appeal, but vindictiveness had never been my nature. "I want recognition," I said finally. "Not necessarily praise or apologies, just acknowledgement that my path was valid, that success comes in different forms, that they were wrong about me." "Then, I think you know what you need to do," Madison replied. "But whatever you decide, do it for yourself, not for them." That evening, I sat on my apartment balcony, overlooking the harbor where several Blue Water yachts were docked, including a sister ship to the Blue Horizon that my family would soon board in Greece. The Mediterranean sunset would look quite different from this Boston twilight. But the vessels themselves were identical, down to the hand-selected artwork in each cabin. I thought about years of dismissive comments, of being the family disappointment of achievement-oriented love that always felt just out of reach. I thought about Harold Whittaker's belief in me, when my own family had none, about the business we had built together, about the respect I had earned in an industry I truly loved. And I made my decision. The next morning, I called Captain Derek into my office and closed the door. Derek was in his 50s, a former Navy officer with salt and pepper hair, and the quiet confidence of someone who had navigated both literal and figurative storms with equal skill. "I need to discuss the Montgomery Charter," I began, then hesitated, unsure how to explain the complicated situation. "Your family, right?" Derek said, with a knowing look. "Stella in bookings mentioned the connection, but she was not sure if you were aware." "Yes, they are my family," I confirmed. "But they do not know I own Blue Water. In fact, they think I am still struggling in some entry-level position. They have specifically excluded me from this trip because they do not consider me successful enough to join them." Derek's eyebrows shot up, but his professional demeanor remained otherwise intact. "That presents an unusual situation. How would you like to handle it?" I laid out my plan. I would fly to Athens ahead of the scheduled departure and be aboard when my family arrived. Derek would greet them normally, get them settled, and at an appropriate moment introduce me not as a family member, but as the owner of Blue Water Yachts. "Essentially, I want to be revealed as their host, not crash their party as an uninvited guest," I explained. "It is important to me that this is handled with dignity. No big confrontation, just a simple statement of fact." Derek nodded thoughtfully. "We can certainly arrange that, Miss Montgomery. The crew will be discreet. Would you like to stay in the owner's suite?" "No," I decided. "Prepare it as usual for my parents. I will take one of the standard staterooms. This is not about displacing anyone or creating discomfort. It is just about finally being honest." Over the next 2 weeks, I made careful preparations. I arranged for my second-in-command, Natalie, to handle operations in my absence. I forwarded Derek documentation, confirming my ownership status to have on hand in case my family accused me of lying. I selected a wardrobe that was professional and elegant, without being flashy, wanting to project success rather than rub it in their faces. The night before my flight to Athens, doubt crept in. Was I making a mistake? Would this revelation heal old wounds, or create new ones? I called Madison in a moment of uncertainty. "I keep wondering if I should just let it go," I confessed. "Maybe confronting them like this is petty." "Rosa, listen to me," Madison said firmly. "Standing up for yourself is not petty. You are not planning some elaborate revenge. You are simply refusing to hide your success any longer. That is healthy, not petty." Her words steadied me, and the next morning, I boarded a flight to Athens with a mixture of anxiety and resolve. The 13-hour journey gave me plenty of time to rehearse what I would say, how I would react to their surprise, whether I would accept inevitable accusations of deception. By the time I landed in Athens, exhaustion had temporarily dampened my emotional turmoil. I checked into a hotel for one night to recover from jet lag before the confrontation. Lying in bed staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, I reflected on how far I had come from the young woman who had defied her family to follow her passion. Whatever happened tomorrow, I had built something meaningful. That truth existed independent of their recognition or approval. The following morning, I took a taxi to the marina, where the Blue Horizon was docked, its sleek white hull gleaming in the Mediterranean sun. Captain Derek greeted me at the gangway with a respectful nod. "Everything is prepared, according to your specifications, Miss Montgomery. Your family is scheduled to arrive at 2 this afternoon." I boarded the vessel that represented years of my hard work and vision, running my hand along the polished teak railing. The crew welcomed me warmly, having been briefly informed of the unusual situation without unnecessary details. "Thank you all for your discretion today," I told them during a quick meeting in the main salon. "This is a personal matter, but I appreciate your professionalism." With 4 hours until my family arrived, I settled into my stateroom, changing into a simple but elegant white linen dress and subtle gold jewelry. I took care with my appearance, not out of vanity, but as armor. Looking my best would help me feel my strongest when facing the people who had always made me feel inadequate. As the appointed hour approached, I positioned myself on the upper deck, partly concealed but with a clear view of the marina entrance. My heart pounded as I spotted them in the distance, a group of expensively dressed people approaching with the entitled confidence of those accustomed to luxury. The moment of truth had arrived. From my vantage point on the upper deck, I watched my family approach the marina. They moved as a well-dressed unit, my father leading the way in designer sunglasses, and a linen suit my mother beside him, in a flowing resort dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Behind them came Ethan talking animatedly to two men, who must be his potential investors, gesturing with the practiced charm he reserved for networking opportunities. Jessica and her husband Blake followed herding their two children, who despite the heat, were immaculately dressed in coordinating outfits. The dock attendants hurried to take their luggage, and I noticed Ethan barely acknowledging the young man who struggled with his oversized suitcase. My father handed out crisp $20 bills as tips, with the slightly exaggerated gesture of someone who wants to be seen as generous, rather than actually being generous. "This is the vessel here, sir," the marina manager directed them toward the blue horizon. "Captain Wilson is expecting you." "Magnificent," my father declared loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Exactly what I expected for what we are paying." My mother peered at the yacht through her designer sunglasses. "I just hope the interior lives up to the website photos. One never really knows with these charter companies." I had to suppress a smile. Blue Water was known for vessels that exceeded the marketing materials, a policy I had personally implemented after taking over operations. Captain Derek appeared at the gangway in his formal whites posture, perfect, the consummate professional. "Welcome to the Blue Horizon, Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery. We are honored to have you aboard." "Thank you, Captain," my father replied, with the slightly condescending tone he always used with service professionals. "I understand. This is your newest vessel. We expect the very best for our journey." "Indeed, sir. Blue Horizon is the flagship of the fleet. If you will all come aboard, we can begin the welcome procedures and orientation." The family filed up the gangway, the children momentarily dropping their practiced decorum to express excitement about boarding the giant boat. Once they were all assembled on the main deck, Captain Derek began his standard welcome speech. "Before we show you to your accommodations, I should mention that we have a special circumstance on this voyage," Derek announced. "The owner of Blue Water Yachts happened to be in Athens on business, and has joined us for your departure." The owner, my father perked up immediately, entrepreneurial interest peaked. "Well, that is a pleasant surprise. Always good to meet successful people in different industries." "Yes, networking opportunities are everywhere," Ethan agreed, straightening his already perfectly straight tie. "I would be happy to introduce you," Derek replied smoothly. "Miss Montgomery, would you care to join us?" I took a deep breath and descended the stairs from the upper deck, emerging into full view of my family. For 3 heartbeats there was only confusion on their faces, their brains struggling to process my unexpected presence. Then one by one comprehension dawned. "Rosa," my mother finally managed her voice, a mixture of confusion and displeasure. "What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Captain Derek continued with impeccable timing. "Miss Rosa Montgomery, owner and CEO of Blue Water Yachts. Welcome aboard your yacht, Miss Rosa." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the children seemed to sense the dramatic shift in atmosphere. My father's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. My mother gripped her designer handbag so tightly her knuckles whitened. Ethan stared at me with naked disbelief that quickly morphed into suspicion. "There must be some mistake," my father finally said, laughing uncomfortably and glancing at his business associates. "Rosa works for a yacht company, she does not own one." "No mistake," Mr. Montgomery, Derek replied. "Miss Rosa has been the controlling owner of Blue Water Yachts for nearly 3 years now, and was chief operating officer for 2 years before that." "That is absurd," Ethan interjected. "This is some kind of joke. Or, she has put you up to this for some reason." I finally spoke, keeping my voice calm and professional. "It is not a joke, Ethan. I have been building my career in this industry for the past decade, while you all assumed I was just, what did you call it? Playing with boats. But you never said anything." My mother accused, recovering her composure enough to go on the offensive. "You deliberately misled us. Did I? I asked mildly. When was the last time any of you asked about my career with genuine interest? When have you ever wanted to hear about my accomplishments rather than telling me about yours? Jessica, always the most perceptive family member, studied my face. You are serious. You actually own this company. There was confusion in her voice, but not the dismissive disbelief of my parents and brother. I do, I confirmed. I began as an entry-level employee and worked my way up. The previous owner, Harold Whitaker, mentored me and eventually offered me a path to ownership. I completed the final purchase of his remaining shares earlier this year. Ethan snorted. Right, and I am secretly the King of England. Come on, Rosa. You expect us to believe you own a fleet of luxury yachts. Where would you get that kind of money? Captain Derek stepped forward, producing a leather portfolio. Perhaps these might clarify the situation, he suggested, handing the folder to my father. Inside were copies of the company registration documents, press releases, announcing my acquisition of controlling interest, and several industry magazine articles profiling me as an up-and-coming force in luxury maritime tourism. My father flipped through the papers, his expression shifting from skepticism to shock. The business associates peered over his shoulder, clearly impressed by what they were seeing. One of them, a distinguished man with silver hair, looked at me with new interest. Montgomery Maritime Holdings, he read from one document, a subsidiary of Montgomery Enterprises. You established your own holding company. Yes, I confirmed. After the initial acquisition of 30% of Blue Water, I created the holding company to manage the investment and subsequent expansion. Expansion, my father echoed weakly. We have added 6 vessels to the fleet in the past 3 years and opened new bases in the Caribbean and South Pacific. I explained, warming to the familiar business discussion, despite the bizarre circumstances. Revenue has increased by 42% under my leadership. The business associates were now looking at me with undisguised admiration, while my family continued to process the revelation. My mother had moved from denial to a strange sort of calculation, her eyes darting between me and the impressive yacht, as if reassessing her entire understanding of her daughter. Well, she finally said with a tight smile, this is certainly surprising. You might have told us, Rosa. We have always supported your interests. The absurdity of this revisionist history nearly made me laugh. Have you? I asked quietly. Because I distinctly remember being called a failure just 3 weeks ago. In fact, I believe the exact phrase was, no failures allowed on this cruise. Ethan had the grace to flush red at the reference to his cruel text. The potential investors he had brought along were now eyeing him with noticeable coolness. That was a misunderstanding, he muttered. Obviously, I did not have all the information. Obviously, I agreed. Now, shall we continue with the boarding? The crew will show you to your staterooms, and we can depart on schedule, unless, of course, my presence makes anyone uncomfortable. This is, after all, supposed to be your exclusive family vacation. The pointed reminder of their deliberate exclusion hung in the air. My father, ever the pragmatist, quickly shifted to damage control mode. Nonsense, he declared, with forced joviality. This is a wonderful surprise. Our daughter, the successful business owner. Of course we want you to join us. The others murmured agreement, though the atmosphere remained thick with tension. As Captain Derek directed the crew to begin showing everyone to their accommodations, I noticed Jessica lingering behind. You really did it, she said when we were relatively alone. You really built something on your own terms. I did, I confirmed. And I am proud of it, even if it is not a traditional Montgomery-approved career. Jessica glanced toward the others, disappearing into the yacht interior, then back at me. I wish I had known. All these years we thought. I know what you thought, I said, not unkindly. That is partly why I am here now. It was time for the truth. She nodded slowly. For what it is worth, I am sorry. About the exclusion, about never really seeing you. It was a small olive branch, but a genuine one. As we followed the others into the yacht interior, I felt the first hint that this revelation might lead to something healing, rather than merely satisfying. The next 7 days would tell whether the Montgomerys could adapt to a new family narrative, one where success was not defined solely by their narrow parameters. The first evening aboard the Blue Horizon unfolded in a fog of awkward interactions and forced pleasantries. Dinner was served on the aft deck, the stunning Athenian sunset providing a backdrop that even my shell-shocked family could appreciate. The yacht chef had prepared a Mediterranean feast, but conversation remained stilted as everyone adjusted to the dramatic shift in family dynamics. My father, ever the lawyer, attempted to take control of the narrative by pivoting immediately to business discussions. "So Rosa," he began between courses, swirling his wine with practiced nonchalance. "Tell us about your company structure. How many employees do you manage? What is your annual revenue?" The questions were asked in the same tone he might use when quizzing a junior associate at his firm, simultaneously acknowledging my position while attempting to establish himself as the more knowledgeable party. "We have 62 full-time employees and about 40 seasonal staff," I replied evenly. "As for financials, we are a private company, so I prefer not to discuss specific numbers at the dinner table." I smiled to soften the rebuff. Industry standards would put a company of our size and fleet composition in the upper quartile of luxury charter operations. One of his law partners, Arthur, leaned forward with genuine interest. "Impressive for someone your age. Did you have investors backing you initially?" "I started with traditional financing for the first phase of acquisition, then leveraged the company performance to secure more favorable terms for subsequent purchases," I explained. The previous owner, Harold, also agreed to a graduated buyout structure that allowed for organic growth to fund part of the transition. As the conversation continued, I noticed Ethan growing increasingly uncomfortable. While my parents were adapting their perception of me in real time, repositioning themselves as supportive all along, Ethan could not so easily escape his explicit dismissal of my career. "I need to check in with the office," he announced abruptly, pushing away from the table and retreating to his stateroom. After dinner, the group dispersed around the yacht. The business associates gravitated toward the Sky Lounge for cognac. The children were settled into bed, and I found myself alone on the bow, watching the lights of Athens twinkle in the distance. Footsteps approached, and my mother appeared beside me, designer wrap draped artfully over her evening dress. "This is all quite dramatic, Rosa," she said, her voice carrying that familiar note of disapproval, thinly disguised as concern. "Was it really necessary to surprise us this way? You could have simply told us about your success." I turned to face her directly. "Would you have believed me without seeing it firsthand?" She hesitated, then sighed. "Perhaps not immediately, but this ambush feels calculated. Like excluding your daughter from a family vacation because you deemed her unsuccessful," I countered quietly. My mother had the decency to look uncomfortable. "That was not my decision alone. Your father felt your presence might be complicated with his colleagues aboard." "Because I was the family failure," I finished for her. "We never used that word," she protested weakly. "Ethan did. Explicitly. In writing." She looked away, unable to defend this point. "Your brother has always been competitive. He did not mean it literally." "He did, Mother. You all did. And that is why I never shared my growing success with any of you. Every time I tried to talk about my work, you changed the subject or dismissed it as trivial." "We were concerned about your future," she insisted. "The stability of your career path." "No," I said firmly. "You were concerned about appearances, about what you could tell your friends about your children. Jessica the doctor, Ethan the financier, and Rosa the disappointment." My mother's eyes glistened unexpectedly in the moonlight. "Is that really how you think we see you?" "It is how you have treated me for the past decade," I replied, softening my tone slightly. "Actions speak louder than words, Mother. And your actions have consistently shown that my worth to this family was tied to meeting your specific definition of success." She was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the water. I suppose we have not been as supportive as we could have been. She finally admitted the closest thing to an apology I had ever heard from her. Your path was just so unconventional. Unconventional does not mean unsuccessful, I pointed out. I found a career I love, built something meaningful, and achieved financial success by any reasonable standard. Is that not what you and Dad always wanted for your children? Yes, but... She trailed off, seemingly unable to articulate why my particular brand of success had been so difficult for them to acknowledge. But it was not in the Montgomery-approved industries I finished for her. Law, medicine, finance, the holy trinity of respectable careers. A ghost of a smile flickered across her face. You always did have a way of cutting to the heart of things. The conversation ended there, unresolved, but perhaps laying groundwork for something new. As she returned to the main salon, I remained at the bow processing the first of what would likely be many difficult family conversations in the days ahead. The following morning, I awoke early and headed to the bridge to check in with Captain Derek before breakfast. He updated me on our planned route for the day, then hesitated. Miss Montgomery, I hope yesterday's proceedings were satisfactory, he said carefully. The crew is aware of the unique situation and will maintain appropriate discretion. Thank you, Derek. Everything was handled perfectly, I assured him. As I turned to leave, I nearly collided with my father, who had apparently come seeking the captain as well. Early riser, as always, he commented, studying me with new eyes. You get that from me. Good morning, Dad, I replied neutrally. I was just coming to discuss today. Itinerary with the captain, he explained, then added somewhat awkwardly. Though I suppose you have more authority in that department than I do. The planned route is excellent, I assured him. I reviewed it with Derek months ago when the charter was first booked. Before I knew who the clients would be, of course. My father nodded, then gestured toward the exterior door. Would you join me for coffee? The view from the sun deck should be spectacular this morning. I agreed, and soon we were settled in comfortable chairs, steaming mugs in hand, watching the early light play across the Athenian coastline. I reviewed those documents more thoroughly last night, he began without preamble. Impressive corporate structure. Very forward-thinking tax planning. Coming from him, this was high praise indeed. Thank you, I replied simply. I had good advisors. Montgomery genes, he declared with the automatic family pride that had always been selectively applied. Business acumen runs in our blood. I let the comment pass without pointing out how recently he had dismissed my business sense entirely. Your mother and I have been talking, he continued, setting down his cup. We may have been hasty in our assessment of your career choices. Hasty, I repeated. Dad, you spent 10 years telling me I was throwing my life away. He winced slightly. Perhaps we were concerned about the unconventional nature of the industry. The hospitality sector can be volatile. So can the stock market, I pointed out. Yet, you never questioned Ethan's investment banking career. Fair point, he conceded, surprising me. I suppose we had certain preconceptions about appropriate professional paths. Preconceptions that led you to exclude me from this trip, I reminded him, because I did not meet your definition of success. My father sighed heavily. That was poorly handled. Your mother wanted to invite you, actually. I was concerned about appearances. With your colleagues, I finished, because you were embarrassed by my presumed lack of achievement. He did not deny it, which was something of a breakthrough in itself. My father had never been one to acknowledge mistakes. I regret that decision now, he said finally. Obviously. It was not quite an apology, but from Robert Montgomery, it was close. We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching a fishing boat cut through the morning waters below. I would be interested in hearing more about your business model, he said eventually. The maritime industry is outside my expertise, but sound principles transcend sectors. It was an olive branch of sorts, an acknowledgement of my professional legitimacy. I spent the next half hour giving him a high-level overview of blue water operations, finding myself falling into the familiar rhythm of business discussion, despite our complicated history. By mid-morning, the yacht was cruising toward our first island destination, and the various family members and guests had settled into vacation mode, albeit with the undercurrent of yesterday's revelation still rippling through every interaction. I was reviewing some company emails in a quiet corner of the main salon when Ethan finally approached me directly. His usual polished confidence was noticeably diminished. So he began awkwardly, "This is all real. You actually own this company." "Yes, Ethan, it is all real." He nodded, slowly processing. "Why did you never say anything? All these years at family gatherings, you just let us think that I was a failure," I supplied. "Perhaps because every time I tried to talk about my work you made some dismissive comment about Rosa and her boats, or changed the subject entirely." "I did not think you were serious about it," he defended. "How was I supposed to know you were building an actual career?" "You could have asked," I pointed out, with genuine interest rather than judgment. "Fair enough," he admitted, surprising me. Ethan rarely conceded any point, but the secrecy seems excessive, almost like you wanted us to underestimate you. I considered this. I did not plan to keep my success secret forever, but after years of judgment, it became easier to avoid the topic than to fight for recognition. And yes, perhaps there was some satisfaction in knowing I was succeeding despite your low expectations. Ethan's expression darkened slightly. "So, this whole revelation was what revenge for us not taking you seriously?" "No," I replied firmly. "It was simply time for the truth. I am not ashamed of what I have built, and I am tired of pretending to be less successful than I am to spare your egos." "Our egos," he repeated incredulously. "You think that is what this is about?" "Isn't it?" I challenged. "You have defined yourself as the successful son for so long that the idea of your little sister out-earning you is threatening." His face confirmed my assessment before he could compose himself. "That is ridiculous. I am happy for your success." "Are you?" I asked quietly, because your text about no failures allowed suggested otherwise. Ethan had the grace to look genuinely uncomfortable. I should not have said that. It was childish." "It was cruel," I corrected, "and revealing of how you really see me." He ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, momentarily disheveling his polished appearance. "I do not know what you want me to say, Rosa. Yes, I was an ass. Yes, I underestimated you. Congratulations on proving me wrong." The bitterness in his tone suggested we had a long way to go before reaching any genuine reconciliation. Unlike my parents, who were already revising history to claim they had supported me all along, Ethan could not so easily escape his explicitly documented disdain. "I do not want your congratulations, Ethan," I said finally. "I just want basic respect as your sister, and as a professional. The same respect I have always given you despite our different paths." He nodded curtly and walked away, our conversation unresolved but at least acknowledged. One by one, the family facades were cracking, revealing the complex truth beneath years of performance and pretense. That evening, as we anchored in a picturesque bay off Hydra, I hosted a formal dinner for all the guests. As owner of the vessel, it was technically my place to act as host, a role that visibly discomforted my father, who was accustomed to being the patriarch at all family gatherings. The meal began with awkward politeness, but as wine flowed, and the beauty of our surroundings worked its magic, genuine conversation gradually emerged. One of the business associates asked about my journey from entry-level to ownership, and for once my family listened as I shared the story of my career path. "The previous owner, Harold, became a true mentor," I explained. "He taught me that luxury is not about opulence, but about anticipating needs before they are expressed, about creating experiences rather than just providing services. That philosophy shows in every aspect of this vessel," one of the wives commented approvingly. "The attention to detail is remarkable." "Thank you," I replied with genuine pleasure. We redesigned many aspects of the guest experience based on feedback and observation, even small changes can significantly enhance guest satisfaction. Rosa always did notice the details others missed. Jessica offered unexpectedly. Even as children, she was the one who remembered everyone's preferences and tried to make things special. This small acknowledgement from my sister touched me more deeply than I had anticipated. It was the first time in years that anyone in my family had recognized one of my strengths without qualification or comparison. As dessert was served, my father unexpectedly raised his glass. "I think a toast is in order," he announced. "To Rosa, whose determination and vision have clearly created something exceptional." The Montgomery spirit of excellence continues, even if through unexpected channels. It was not a full acknowledgement of their past dismissal, but it was a public recognition of my achievement. The others raised their glasses, echoing the sentiment with varying degrees of sincerity. "And to family," I added, raising my own glass. "May we learn to see and appreciate each other for who we truly are, not just who we expect each other to be." The toast hung in the air, both celebration and challenge. As the evening progressed, I observed the subtle shifts in family dynamics, the first tentative steps toward a new equilibrium. Nothing was resolved in a single day, but the fortress of family mythology had been breached, allowing truth to begin its slow, transformative work. The final morning of our cruise found me alone on deck at dawn, watching the sun rise over the Aegean. After 6 days at sea together, my family and I had reached a fragile new understanding. Not quite reconciliation, but a dismantling of old patterns that created space for something potentially healthier. My mother had gradually shifted from defensiveness to a tentative pride in my accomplishments, though she still occasionally slipped into comments about how I might have mentioned my success earlier. My father had moved into full incorporation mode, speaking about my business as if he had always supported my maritime ambitions and offering unsolicited advice about expansion opportunities. Ethan maintained a certain distance, his competitive nature struggling with the revelation that his failure sister had built something truly impressive. Only Jessica seemed to engage with genuine openness, asking thoughtful questions about my journey and acknowledging the family patterns that had driven us apart. During a private moment walking together on Santorini, she had admitted, "I always envied your courage to pursue what you loved, even when no one supported you." "You did?" I had asked, genuinely surprised. "My path was the safe one," she confessed. "The approved one. Sometimes, I wonder what I might have chosen if I had felt truly free to decide." As the cruise concluded, and we returned to Athens harbor, I found myself reflecting on what had been gained and lost in this week of revelations. The family myth of Rosa, the disappointment, had been shattered, but what would replace it remained uncertain. Captain Derek approached as the crew prepared for final docking procedures. "We will be arriving in port within the hour, Miss Montgomery. Everything is proceeding on schedule." "Thank you, Derek. The journey has been excellent as always." He hesitated, then added quietly, "If I may say so, you have handled a challenging personal situation with remarkable grace." I smiled appreciatively at his understated support. Sometimes, truth is the only path forward, however uncomfortable. As we disembarked in Athens, the farewells were markedly different from our initial encounter. My father shook my hand firmly, then surprised me with an awkward hug. "We should discuss your expansion plans over dinner when we are back in Boston," he said. "I might have some useful contacts in the Mediterranean banking sector." My mother kissed my cheek, holding on a moment longer than usual. "You must come to the house soon and tell us more about your company. I want to hear everything." The sincerity in her voice suggested she might actually mean it this time. Ethan nodded stiffly, still processing his repositioning in the family hierarchy. "Good yacht," he offered tersely. "Impressive operation." From him, even this grudging acknowledgement represented progress. Jessica hugged me warmly. "This changes everything you know," she whispered. "Not just how they see you, but how they see all of us. What success really means." I watched them depart in their arranged transportation. The Montgomery family, altered in ways both subtle and profound by our week together. Whether those changes would endure remained to be seen, but something fundamental had shifted in our family system. 6 months later, we gathered for Thanksgiving at my parents' Beacon Hill home, the first major family holiday since the cruise revelation. I arrived with a measure of trepidation, uncertain whether the new awareness would have survived, or if old patterns would have reasserted themselves. The differences were immediately apparent. My mother had displayed recent articles about blue water yachts on the coffee table, alongside the usual collection of Jessica medical achievements and Ethan financial successes. My father introduced me to his colleagues with explicit pride in my entrepreneurial accomplishments, rather than vague references to working with boats. Most surprisingly, Ethan approached me during pre-dinner drinks with uncharacteristic humility. "I have been thinking about what you said on the yacht," he admitted. "About respecting different paths to success. You were right. I had a narrow view and I apologize for the things I said." The words clearly did not come easily to him, making them all the more meaningful. "Thank you," I replied simply. "That means a lot." The dinner conversation reflected our evolving dynamic. Instead of the traditional Montgomery achievement recitations, my mother encouraged more balanced sharing. When Jessica's husband Blake mentioned a colleague who had left medicine to pursue a creative passion, my father surprisingly commented, "Sometimes the unconventional path is the right one," with a meaningful glance in my direction. Later that evening, as guests departed and family dispersed to various corners of the house, I found myself alone, with my grandfather portrait in my father's study. The Montgomery dreamer streak he had recognized in me had ultimately led to a success even the most practical family members could not dismiss. My mother found me there, 2 glasses of brandy in hand. She offered one to me and settled into the leather chair opposite. "I have been doing some reflection since our cruise," she said after a thoughtful sip, "about the kind of mother I have been, the kind of family we have been." I waited, giving her space to continue. "We were so certain about what success should look like," she continued, "so convinced that our path was the only secure one. We wanted to protect you from struggle." "I know," I acknowledged, "but in trying to protect me from failure, you nearly prevented me from finding my own success." She nodded slowly. "I realize that now. The irony is that you are probably the most successful of our children by any objective measure. You built something from nothing on your own terms." The acknowledgement so long withheld washed over me with unexpected emotion. "Thank you for seeing that," I said quietly. "I should have seen it sooner," she admitted. "We all should have." We sat in companionable silence, the decades of misunderstanding, not erased, but perhaps beginning to heal. The Montgomery family would never be perfect, our sharp edges and competitive instincts too deeply ingrained, but truth had created an opening for something more authentic to grow. In the months that followed, I established new boundaries with my family, engaging on my terms, rather than constantly seeking their approval. I began hosting family gatherings on my recently purchased waterfront property, subtly shifting the power dynamic away from my parents' traditional control. My business continued to thrive, expanding into new markets with the quiet confidence that comes from true passion rather than external validation. I established a scholarship program for young people interested in maritime careers, but lacking traditional resources, remembering how close I had come to abandoning my dreams under family pressure. The greatest lesson from my journey was not about proving my worth to others, but discovering that true success comes from living authentically rather than performing to meet external expectations. The validation I had once desperately sought from my family paled in comparison to the satisfaction of building something meaningful aligned with my values. As I look back on that pivotal week aboard the Blue Horizon, I realize that revealing my success was never really about changing my family perception of me. It was about finally claiming my story on my own terms, refusing to participate any longer in the diminishment of my choices and achievements. The measure of success is not in titles or bank accounts or even family approval, but in the courage to follow your own compass, even when everyone around you points in a different direction. Sometimes the path to healing family wounds is not through compromise or concession, but through standing firmly in your truth and giving others the opportunity to meet you there. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself with family members who refused to see your value or success? How did you handle that difficult conversation? Share your experience in the comments below, and do not forget to like and subscribe for LibriVox Bailey. More stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Remember, your worth is not determined by others' opinions, but by the authentic life you build for yourself. Thank you for joining me on this journey of self-discovery and family reconciliation. Until next time, be proud of your unique path to success, whatever that looks like for you.